The moment Georgia Winters felt the dusty ground of Sloane's Main Street rush up to meet her face, she knew her pride had finally cost her everything. The August sun of 1878 blazed mercilessly over the small Nevada town, and her empty stomach had been making angry protests for 3 days straight. She had ignored the warning signs, the dizzy spells, the trembling in her hands, all because she refused to beg. Now, as darkness crept into the edges of her vision, she wondered if stubbornness was truly a virtue or just another word for foolishness. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was the thunder of horse hooves and a man's urgent voice calling out. When she opened her eyes again, Georgia found herself staring at an unfamiliar wooden ceiling. The scent of something savory cooking made her stomach clench with desperate need. She tried to sit up, but strong hands gently pressed her back down. "Easy now," a deep voice said. "You have been out for near an hour. I got some broth warming on the stove. You need to take it slow." Georgia turned her head to see a man in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and concerned hazel eyes watching her from a chair beside the bed. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and he wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy. There was something inherently trustworthy about his face, open and honest in a way that made her want to cry for reasons she could not quite name. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, her throat painfully dry. "Name is Quentin Carmichael. I was riding into town when I saw you drop." "You hit the ground hard, miss. Scared me half to death." He reached for a cup of water on the bedside table and helped her take small sips. "What is your name?" "Georgia Winters." She swallowed carefully, grateful for the cool water. "Where am I, my place?" "It is not much. Just a small house on the edge of town, but it is clean and safe. I hope you do not mind that I brought you here. The doctor was out on a call and you needed somewhere to rest." Georgia looked around the modest room. It was indeed simple, but everything was neat and well maintained. Through the doorway she could see into a small kitchen where a pot bubbled on the stove. "I should go," she said, though the thought of standing made her feel ill. "You should eat," Quentin corrected firmly but kindly. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" The question brought heat to her cheeks. She turned her face away, unable to meet his eyes. "I am fine. Miss Winters, you fainted from hunger in the middle of Main Street. That is about as far from fine as a person can get." His tone was not judgmental, just matter of fact. "Let me get you some broth. Then we can talk about what happens next." He stood and walked into the kitchen, and Georgia took the opportunity to study him more carefully. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, reaching for a bowl and ladling out steaming broth with practiced efficiency. When he returned, he helped her sit up against the pillows, mindful of her weakness. "Small sips," he instructed, handing her the bowl. "Your stomach needs to remember what food is." The first taste of the warm, salty broth was like heaven. Georgia had to force herself not to gulp it down. Tears pricked at her eyes as she sipped slowly, feeling warmth spread through her body for the first time in days. Quentin settled back in his chair, watching her carefully. "How long have you been in Sloane?" 3 weeks, she answered between sips. "I came from California. My father died 6 months ago and I thought I could make a fresh start here. I had some money, but it ran out faster than I expected." "No family back in California. No one." The words came out flatter than she intended. "My mother died when I was young. It was just my father and me, and then just me." "What about work?" "Sloane is not big, but there are usually jobs to be had." Georgia finished the broth and set the bowl aside. Already she felt a bit stronger, though exhausted. "I tried the hotel, the saloon, the general store, even the laundry. Everyone said the same thing. They had all the help they needed, or they wanted someone with more experience, or they just did not want to hire a woman alone." She met his eyes finally. "I think some of them assumed I was looking for a different kind of work." Quentin's jaw tightened. "That is not right." "No, but it is reality." Georgia pulled the blanket higher, suddenly aware that someone had removed her boots and loosened her collar. "Thank you for helping me, Mr. Carmichael. I will leave as soon as I can stand." "And go where?" The question was gentle but pointed. "I will figure something out." "Miss Winters, I am not trying to pry into your business, but I cannot in good conscience let you walk out of here with nowhere to go and no food in your belly." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I have a proposition for you if you will hear it." Georgia felt her guard go up immediately. She had heard propositions before, and they never ended well for women in her position. "What kind of proposition?" "The respectable kind," he said quickly, reading her expression. "I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles outside town. We have been shorthand since our cook quit last month. The work is hard, cooking for 15 ranch hands 3 times a day, but it pays fair and comes with a room in the bunkhouse and all the food you can eat. I could put in a word with my boss, Mr. Reynolds. He is a decent man." "Why would you do that for me? You do not even know me." Quentin was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his words carefully. "My sister died 2 years ago. She was traveling alone trying to get to Oregon, and she got sick on the trail. Nobody would help her because she did not have money to pay. By the time someone finally took pity on her, it was too late." His voice remained steady, but Georgia could see the pain in his eyes. "Her name was Sarah. She was 23 years old. I swore after that I would never turn my back on someone who needed help." The raw honesty in his words disarmed her completely. "I am sorry about your sister." "Thank you. So will you let me help? Will you at least meet Mr. Reynolds?" Georgia thought about her options, which were precisely none. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Yes, thank you." A slow smile spread across Quentin's face, transforming it completely. "Good. Get some rest now. I will ride out to the ranch in the morning and talk to Mr. Reynolds. You can stay here tonight. I cannot take your bed, Mr. Carmichael. Call me Quentin, and I will sleep on the chair just fine. I have done it plenty of times." He stood and collected her empty bowl. "There is more broth if you get hungry later, and Miss Winters, call me Georgia." "Georgia," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his voice. "Everything is going to be all right now. I promise you that." After he left the room, Georgia stared at the ceiling and wondered why she believed him. She had learned not to trust promises, especially from men she barely knew. But there was something about Quentin Carmichael that felt different, genuine in a way that made her want to hope again. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, sleeping deeply for the first time in weeks. Morning came with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Georgia woke slowly, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She sat up carefully, relieved to find that the dizziness had mostly passed. Her stomach growled loudly at the cooking smells. "Perfect timing," Quentin said, appearing in the doorway. "I figured you could use a real breakfast. How are you feeling?" "Better, much better." She swung her legs out of bed, noticing that someone had placed her boots neatly beside it. "Thank you." He waved off her gratitude. "Come eat. I am making enough for both of us." Georgia followed him into the kitchen, where he had set 2 plates on a small wooden table. He served up bacon, eggs, and thick slices of toasted bread with butter. She had to resist the urge to fall on the food like a starving animal. "Take your time," Quentin reminded her, sitting across from her with his own plate. "Your stomach is still getting used to food again." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Georgia studied him when she thought he was not looking, taking in the details she had missed the night before. He had the build of a man who worked hard for his living, lean and strong. His hands were calloused but clean, his movements economical and sure. There was a quiet competence about him that she found reassuring. "What?" he asked, catching her watching him. "Nothing. I am just trying to figure you out." "Not much to figure. I am a simple man. I work hard, treat people decent, and try to do right by my word." He took a sip of coffee. "What about you? What brought you all the way to Nevada?" Georgia considered how much to share. "My father was a gambling man. He thought he could make our fortune in San Francisco, but he only managed to lose everything we had. When he died, there was nothing left but debts. I could not stay there anymore. I had heard there were opportunities in Nevada, mining towns where people needed help. I thought I could find work, maybe save enough to eventually buy a little place of my own. That is a good dream. It seems foolish now. No dream is foolish if it keeps you moving forward." Quentin finished his breakfast and pushed back from the table. "I am going to ride out to the Double R now. Should be back by noon. Will you be all right here?" "I will be fine." "But Quentin, what if Mr. Reynolds says no?" "Then we will figure something else out. One way or another, Georgia, you are not going hungry again. You have my word on that." After he left, Georgia cleaned up the breakfast dishes and explored the small house more thoroughly. It was clear that Quentin lived alone and had for some time. There were no feminine touches, no photographs or personal items that spoke of family nearby. The house was functional and clean but sparse, as though he had never quite bothered to make it a home. She found herself straightening things that did not need straightening, a nervous habit to pass the time. What if Mr. Reynolds refused to hire her? What if he demanded experience she did not have? Worse, what if he was the kind of man who would only hire her if she agreed to arrangements she had no intention of accepting? But Quentin had said Mr. Reynolds was decent. She had to trust that. She had to trust him. The alternative was returning to the streets with no prospects and no money, and she had already proven where that path led. Quentin returned before noon, as promised, and the smile on his face told Georgia everything she needed to know before he spoke. He said yes. "You start tomorrow morning. The pay is $25 a month plus room and board. The work starts at 4 in the morning to get breakfast ready, and you will finish after supper cleanup, but you get Sunday afternoons off." He pulled out a chair and sat, still grinning. "Mr. Reynolds was glad to hear about you. He has been doing the cooking himself, and he is right tired of it." Relief flooded through Georgia so intensely she felt dizzy again. "Thank you. I do not know how to thank you. No need for thanks. You are the one who will be doing the hard work." His expression grew more serious. "I told Mr. Reynolds the truth, that you had fallen on hard times but that you were a decent person looking for an honest job. He is willing to give you a chance. The rest is up to you. I will not let you down. I know you will not." He stood. "I need to head out there now for my shift. Why do not you rest up today and I will come get you first thing tomorrow morning? The ranch is too far to walk, especially in this heat." "All right, Quentin, I mean it. Thank you for everything." He tipped his hat to her, a small smile playing at his lips. "See you tomorrow, Georgia." That night, alone in Quentin's house again with his insistence that she continue using his bed, Georgia allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness or despair as she had so many times in recent weeks, but from relief and something else she could not quite name. Gratitude, certainly, but also a strange, tentative hope that maybe her luck had finally turned. And beneath it all, a warm feeling when she thought about the cowboy with kind eyes who had carried her home and refused to abandon her to her fate. The next morning, Quentin arrived before dawn with a horse for her to ride. Georgia had dressed in her cleanest dress, which was not saying much, but she had done her best to look presentable. He helped her mount, his hand steady at her waist, and she tried not to notice how her heart skipped at the contact. The ride to the Double R Ranch took about 40 minutes in the pale pre-dawn light. Quentin pointed out landmarks along the way, telling her stories about the area that made her laugh despite her nervousness. He had an easy way about him, comfortable with silence but happy to fill it when needed. Georgia found herself relaxing in his presence, the tight knot of anxiety in her chest loosening gradually. The ranch itself was larger than she expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, a large barn, and extensive corrals. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, dark shapes against the lightening sky. Quentin led her to the bunkhouse, a long wooden structure with a separate wing that housed the kitchen and dining area. A man in his 50s with graying hair and weather-worn features waited on the porch. He wore dusty work clothes and had the bearing of someone used to command. This, Georgia assumed, was Mr. Reynolds. "Morning, boss," Quentin said, dismounting and helping Georgia down. "This is Miss Georgia Winters, Miss Winters." Mr. Reynolds extended his hand and Georgia shook it, grateful that his grip was firm but not crushing. "Quentin speaks highly of you. I appreciate you taking on this job on such short notice." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Reynolds. I promise you will not regret it." "I believe that." "Come on, I will show you the kitchen and your room." "Quentin, you best get to work. The horses will not feed themselves." Quentin caught Georgia's eye and gave her an encouraging nod before heading toward the barn. She followed Mr. Reynolds into the bunkhouse, her heart pounding. The kitchen was large and reasonably well equipped, with a massive cast iron stove, long preparation tables, and shelves stocked with supplies. The dining area beyond held several long tables with benches where the ranch hands would take their meals. "Breakfast is at 5:30, lunch at noon, and supper at 6, Mr. Reynolds explained. "The men work hard, so they eat plenty. Nothing fancy required, just good solid food. You will find meat in the smokehouse, vegetables in the root cellar, and dry goods in the pantry. If you need anything specific, make a list, and I will have it brought out from town." "I understand. Your room is through here." He led her to a small but private room off the kitchen. It contained a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a chair. A window overlooked the yard. "It is not much, but it is yours. You can fix it up however you like." "It is perfect, thank you." Mr. Reynolds studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Quentin told me you have had some hard times recently. I respect that you are trying to pull yourself up rather than looking for charity or taking an easier path. I expect you to work hard, but I will treat you fair. You will get your wages at the end of each month, and if you need anything before then, you come talk to me. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "I appreciate your trust in me. Do not thank me yet. Wait until you have fed 15 hungry cowboys for a week." A slight smile cracked his weathered face. "Now, I had better show you where everything is before the men start showing up expecting breakfast." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Georgia threw herself into the work with determined energy, grateful to have something to do, somewhere to be. She made biscuits and gravy, fried potatoes with onions, scrambled 24 eggs, and brewed pot after pot of strong coffee. When the ranch hands began filing in, they eyed her with curiosity but were polite enough, thanking her for the food and complimenting her biscuits. Quentin came in with a group of other cowboys, dust already coating his clothes despite the early hour. When his eyes found her across the room, he smiled, and Georgia felt warmth spread through her chest. He got his food and sat with the other men, but she caught him glancing her way several times during the meal. After breakfast, she cleaned up the kitchen and began preparing for lunch. Mr. Reynolds had left her detailed notes about quantities and preferences, which helped immensely. By the time noon rolled around, she had a simple but hearty meal of beef stew and cornbread ready. The days quickly fell into a rhythm. Georgia rose before dawn, prepared 3 meals a day, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The work was indeed hard, just as Quentin had warned, but she found satisfaction in it. She was good at cooking, she discovered, and took pride in watching the men enjoy her food. They began to warm to her, offering respectful greetings and occasional compliments. Some of the younger hands tried mild flirting, but she kept them at a distance with polite but firm boundaries. Quentin, however, was different. He never flirted or made inappropriate comments, but he found small ways to help her. He would carry in heavy sacks of flour without being asked. He fixed a wobbly table leg in the kitchen. He brought her fresh eggs from the henhouse and choice vegetables from the ranch garden. These small kindnesses touched Georgia more than grand gestures ever could. 2 weeks after she started working at the ranch, Quentin appeared in the kitchen after supper cleanup. Most of the men had retired to the bunkhouse or gone into town. "Evening, Georgia. You got a minute?" She hung up her dish towel and pushed a strand of hair out of her face. "Of course. What is it?" "I was thinking, since tomorrow is your afternoon off, maybe you would like to go into town. I could take you, help you pick up anything you need. I know you have not had a chance to get there since you started working." Georgia hesitated. In the 2 weeks since starting at the ranch, she had been so focused on proving herself that she had barely thought about anything else. But she did need a few personal items, and the thought of spending time with Quentin outside of work made her stomach flutter in a way that was both pleasant and frightening. "That is kind of you. I do have a few things I need to get." "Good. We can take the wagon, make a proper trip of it. Maybe stop at the hotel dining room for lunch. My treat. Quentin, you have already done so much for me. I cannot let you pay for my meals too. Then consider it me buying lunch for a friend. Is that acceptable, friend?" The word should not have disappointed her, but it did just a little. Still, she smiled and nodded. "All right, thank you. I will come get you around 9. That will give us plenty of time to handle your errands and still get back before dark." After he left, Georgia found herself looking forward to the next day with more anticipation than she had felt about anything in a long time. She told herself it was just because she needed supplies, that it had nothing to do with Quentin himself. But as she lay in bed that night, she could not stop thinking about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the gentleness in his hands when he helped her down from a horse, or the sound of his laugh when something amused him. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. Falling for Quentin Carmichael would be foolish. He had helped her out of kindness and maybe guilt about his sister, nothing more. He probably saw her as a charity case, someone to be protected but not pursued. And even if by some miracle he did harbor feelings for her, what could come of it? She was still barely scraping by, still fundamentally alone in the world. She had nothing to offer a man like him, but her heart, stubborn and hopeful despite everything, refused to listen to reason. The next morning, Georgia took extra care with her appearance. She washed thoroughly, pinned her dark blonde hair neatly, and wore her best dress, which had been cleaned and mended during her limited free time. When Quentin arrived with the wagon, his eyes widened slightly, and he seemed to lose his words for a moment. "You look nice," he finally said, his voice a bit rougher than usual. "Thank you, so do you." It was true. He had clearly made an effort as well, wearing clean clothes and a vest she had not seen before. His hair was neatly combed and he had shaved recently. The ride into Sloan was pleasant, the morning sun warm but not yet oppressive. They talked easily about everything and nothing. Quentin told her stories about the ranch and the other cowboys, making her laugh with his imitations of the cook who had quit and left Mr. Reynolds in a bind. Georgia found herself sharing memories of her childhood in California before her father's gambling had destroyed everything. "What was he like, your father?" Quentin asked. Georgia considered the question. "Charming, reckless, utterly convinced that the next game, the next investment, would be the one that made our fortune. He loved me in his way, I think, but he loved the thrill of the gamble more. After my mother died, it got worse. It was like he was trying to win enough to make up for losing her, but of course you cannot buy back someone who is gone. That must have been hard, watching that." "It was. But it also taught me something important. I learned that you cannot rely on luck or other people to save you. You have to work for what you want, plan for the future, take care of yourself." "That is true," Quentin agreed. "But it is also true that sometimes we all need help. There is no shame in that. I am learning that. You taught me that." He glanced at her, something warm and intense in his gaze that made her breath catch. Then he looked back at the road ahead. "You would have figured it out eventually. You are strong, Georgia, stronger than you know." They reached Sloan in good time. Quentin helped her down from the wagon and walked with her to the general store, where she purchased soap, thread, and a few other necessities. She had received her first month's wages the day before, and while most of it would go to savings, she allowed herself these small luxuries. As they left the store, they nearly collided with a well-dressed woman in her 40s accompanied by two younger women who appeared to be her daughters. "Quentin Carmichael," the older woman said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "What a surprise to see you in town." "And with a young lady, no less, Mrs. Patterson." Quentin's tone was polite but notably cooler than it had been moments before. "Miss Winters, this is Mrs. Patterson and her daughters, Lily and Rose." "Charmed, I am sure, Mrs. Patterson said, though her eyes raked over Georgia with clear disapproval. "Miss Winters, are you new to Sloan? I do not recall seeing you at church." "I work at the Double R Ranch," Georgia replied evenly, recognizing condescension when she heard it. "Oh, the cook, Mrs. Patterson's lips pursed slightly. "How industrious of you. Quentin, I was just saying to Mr. Patterson the other day that you really should join us for Sunday dinner sometime. Rose here makes a wonderful roast." She nudged her younger daughter forward, a pretty girl with blonde curls who looked mortified by her mother's obvious machinations. "That is kind of you, madam, but I am usually pretty busy on Sundays," Quentin said diplomatically. "Surely you can spare one afternoon. A young man like yourself should not be spending all his time working. You need to think about your future, about settling down with a nice girl from a good family." The implication was clear as she glanced meaningfully between Quentin and Rose. Georgia felt her face heat with embarrassment and anger. She started to make an excuse to leave, but Quentin's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers in a gesture that was unmistakably possessive. "Actually, Mrs. Patterson, I have been thinking quite a bit about my future lately. And I am right content with how things are shaping up." His voice remained polite, but there was steel underneath it. "If you will excuse us, Georgia and I have lunch plans." He led Georgia away, still holding her hand, leaving Mrs. Patterson sputtering behind them. They walked in silence for half a block before Georgia found her voice. "You did not have to do that." "Do what? Defend me. Make it look like we are courting. That woman will spread gossip all over town now." Quentin stopped walking and turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Would that be so terrible? People thinking we are courting." Georgia's heart began to pound. "I suppose that depends on whether it is true or just for show. What if I said I would like it to be true?" She searched his face, looking for signs of pity or obligation, but found only sincerity and something that looked very much like hope. "Quentin, you do not owe me anything. You already saved my life. You do not have to pretend to have feelings for me to protect my reputation." Is that what you think this is? Obligation? He stepped closer, his free hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. Georgia, I have been trying to work up the courage to tell you how I feel for weeks now. Since the moment I saw you on that street, if I am being honest. I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I am tired of pretending. I am falling for you. Maybe I already fell. Georgia felt tears prick at her eyes. I thought you just saw me as someone who needed help. At first, maybe. But then I got to know you. I saw how hard you work, how proud you are, how you make the men laugh during meals. I saw your strength and your kindness and your determination. And I thought, this is the kind of woman I could spend my life with. This is the kind of woman I want to spend my life with. I am scared, she whispered. I have lost so much already. I do not know if I can bear to lose anything else. I am scared too, but I think maybe some things are worth being scared for. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I am not asking you to have all the answers right now. I am just asking if you might feel even a fraction of what I feel. If there is a chance for us. Georgia thought about the past month, about every kind gesture and warm smile, every moment her heart had sped up when he walked into a room. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how he made her laugh when she had forgotten how he looked at her like she mattered. More than a fraction, she admitted. Quentin, I have been fighting how I feel because it seemed impossible. But yes, there is definitely a chance for us. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms right there on the street, holding her close, and Georgia wrapped her arms around him, feeling like she had finally come home. Can I court you properly? He asked, pulling back just enough to see her face. I know we are doing this backward, but I want to do right by you. Yes, I would like that very much. Good. Then let me start by taking you to lunch like I promised. He offered his arm, which she took gladly, and they walked toward the hotel dining room together. Lunch was a simple affair of stew and fresh bread, but it felt special because they were together, officially courting. They talked about their hopes and dreams, their pasts and their possibilities for the future. Quentin told her about his plans to eventually buy his own small ranch, nothing fancy, just enough to make a good living. Georgia shared her dream of having a real home, a place that was truly hers where she could put down roots. Maybe our dreams are not so different, Quentin observed. Maybe they could even be the same dream if things work out between us. Maybe, Georgia agreed, her heart full of hope. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Quentin courted her with old-fashioned propriety, always respectful of her reputation and her position at the ranch. They took walks together on her afternoons off, talking for hours about everything under the sun. He brought her wildflowers from the range, which she pressed and kept in her room. She saved him the best cuts of meat at dinner, and baked his favorite apple pie whenever she could get the ingredients. The other ranch hands noticed, of course, and mostly reacted with good-natured teasing. A few of the younger men seemed disappointed, having harbored their own hopes, but they remained respectful. Mr. Reynolds said nothing directly, but Georgia caught him watching them sometimes with what might have been approval. 3 months after Georgia had fainted on Main Street, Quentin asked her to take a ride with him on her day off. They rode out past the ranch boundaries to a small rise that overlooked a pretty valley with a creek running through it. "What do you think of this spot?" he asked as they stood together, his arm around her waist. "It is beautiful, so peaceful. This land is for sale. 50 acres with water rights. The price is fair, and I have been saving for years. I have almost enough for a down payment." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I have been thinking about my future a lot lately, about our future if you will have me." George's breath caught. "Quentin, I know it has only been a few months, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Georgia. I want to build a life with you, right here on this land. I want to marry you if you will have me. We could build a house together, start a small ranch, maybe have children someday. I cannot promise you riches or an easy life, but I can promise you that I will work hard every day to make you happy. I can promise you that you will never go hungry again, never be alone again, never have to wonder if someone has your back, because I will, always. Tears streamed down Georgia's face, but she was smiling. Yes, yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Quentin. I think I have loved you since the moment you refused to let me give up on myself. He kissed her then, deep and sweet, sealing their promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and grinning like fools. I should ask Mr. Reynolds for his blessing, Quentin said. And I want to do this right. A proper wedding in the church, if that is what you want. I do not need anything fancy, I just need you. You will have me for the rest of my life. But you deserve a proper wedding anyway. We will talk to Reverend Matthews and set a date. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, making plans for their future. That evening, Quentin spoke with Mr. Reynolds, who gave his wholehearted approval and even offered to stand up for Quentin at the wedding. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Georgia continued her work at the ranch, but now she planned a wedding in her spare time. Several of the ranch hands' wives, having heard the news, came out to help her make a simple wedding dress. Even Mrs. Patterson from town, perhaps feeling guilty about her earlier rudeness, donated some lace for the hem. They set the wedding for a Saturday in early December, giving Quentin time to finalize the land purchase and begin preparations for building their house. Several of the ranch hands volunteered to help with construction, and Mr. Reynolds arranged for Quentin to have every Saturday off until the house was complete. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool. Georgia dressed in her simple gown, her hair arranged by the wives who had become her friends. She had no family to give her away, but Mr. Reynolds offered to walk her down the aisle, an honor that made her cry. The church was full despite the simplicity of the affair. The ranch hands had all come, cleaned up and on their best behavior. Townspeople Georgia barely knew had turned out as well, curious about the cook who had captured the heart of one of Sloane's most eligible bachelors. But Georgia only had eyes for Quentin, standing at the altar in a new suit, his face full of love and nervous joy. When Mr. Reynolds placed her hand in Quentin's, she felt the rightness of it down to her bones. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with warmth and dignity. Quentin's vows were simple but heartfelt, promising to love and honor her all the days of his life. Georgia promised the same, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. When Quentin kissed her as his wife for the first time, the small church erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back up the aisle together, husband and wife, grinning at each other like they had won the greatest prize in the world. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with the wives providing food and the men providing music. They danced in the barn until late in the evening, surrounded by the goodwill and affection of their community. For someone who had felt so alone just months ago, being surrounded by so many people who cared felt almost overwhelming to Georgia. Happy? Quentin asked as they danced, his arm secure around her waist. Happier than I knew I could be. Good. Because this is just the beginning, Mrs. Carmichael. We have a whole life ahead of us. They spent their wedding night in Quentin's little house in town, the same place where their story had begun. It felt fitting somehow, coming full circle. In the morning, they would begin the real work of building their life together. But for now, they simply held each other, grateful for the unlikely series of events that had brought them together. True to his word, Quentin worked tirelessly on their new house. Georgia continued cooking at the ranch during the week, but on Saturdays she would pack a lunch and ride out to their land, watching the house take shape board by board. The other ranch hands kept their promise to help, and even Mr. Reynolds contributed labor and materials, saying it was a wedding gift. By spring, the house was finished, modest but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a proper stove, and a front porch that overlooked the valley. They moved in on a sunny April afternoon, carrying their few possessions together. "Welcome home," Quentin said, lifting Georgia over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "It is perfect. It is everything I dreamed of." They furnished the house gradually, buying pieces when they could afford them or building them themselves. Quentin built her a dining table and chairs. Georgia sewed curtains from fabric she bought in town. Slowly, the house became a home, filled with their combined efforts and shared love. Georgia left her position at the ranch that summer when she discovered she was expecting their first child. Mr. Reynolds threw her a small party on her last day, presenting her with a cast iron skillet and his best wishes. The ranch hands had all contributed money for a cradle, which Quentin carried home with tears in his eyes. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1880, with the doctor from town and 2 of the ranch wives in attendance. Georgia labored for hours, squeezing Quentin's hand so hard she left marks. But when they finally placed their baby boy in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "He is perfect," she whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. "What should we name him?" Quentin asked, his voice rough with emotion. Georgia thought about all they had been through, all the blessings that had come from the darkest moment of her life. "What about Samuel? It means asked of God, and I think maybe he was. I think maybe we both were. Samuel Carmichael, I like it." Quentin kissed his wife's forehead, then his son's. "Thank you, Georgia, for him, for us, for everything." Samuel was a healthy, happy baby who grew into a curious, energetic toddler. Quentin taught him to ride almost before he could walk, setting him on a gentle mare and walking beside him around the property. Georgia taught him his letters and numbers, determined that their son would have the education she had barely managed to scrape together. The ranch prospered modestly. They started with a small herd of cattle, which Quentin managed with skill and patience. Georgia kept chickens and a large garden, selling eggs and vegetables in town for extra income. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. 2 years after Samuel was born, Georgia gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Clara. The births were easier than the first, and Quentin was overjoyed to have daughters to spoil. The house that had seemed spacious for 2 now bustled with activity and noise, but neither of them would have changed a thing. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters when the cattle struggled, summers when drought threatened their water supply, illnesses that frightened them in the night. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quentin surprised Georgia with a gift he had been working on in secret. He led her outside after supper, the children tucked into bed, and showed her a wooden sign he had carved and painted. "Carmichael Ranch," it read, with their names and the year 1878 below. "That is the year we met," Georgia said, touching the carved letters. "The year my life really started," Quentin corrected. "I thought it should be marked. This place, this life, everything we built, it all started the day I found you on Main Street." "The worst day of my life became the best day," Georgia reflected. "If someone had told me then where I would be now, I never would have believed them. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, living out here, all the hard work?" "Never, not for a single moment." She turned to face him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You saved me, Quentin. in every way a person can be saved. And then you loved me and gave me a family and a home. How could I ever regret that?" He kissed her softly. "You saved me too, you know. I was just going through the motions before you came along. You gave me purpose, something to work for beyond just surviving." They stood together on their porch as the sun set over their valley, watching the sky turn gold and pink. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, their land stretched out, full of potential and promise. More years passed in a blur of activity and growth. Samuel grew tall and strong, showing his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind. The twins were as different as could be. Emma quiet and studious, Clara wild and adventurous. Quentin taught them all to ride and rope, to respect the land and the animals. Georgia taught them to read and figure, to cook and clean, to value education and hard work. When Samuel turned 10, they enrolled him in the school that had been built in Sloan, riding him into town each Monday morning and collecting him on Friday afternoon. The following year, the twins joined him. The house felt too quiet during the week, but the weekends were chaotic reunions that filled Georgia's heart to bursting. Their ranch continued to grow. They purchased additional land when a neighbor moved east, expanding their herd. Quentin hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, young men who reminded him of his younger self. Georgia taught them to read in the evenings after supper, the same way she had been teaching her own children. In 1888, 10 years after their wedding, Georgia found herself pregnant again. The news was unexpected as the twins were now 8 years old, but not unwelcome. This time she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Sarah, after Quentin's sister. It felt like closing a circle, honoring the loss that had ultimately led to their meeting. Little Sarah was adored by her older siblings, who helped care for her with varying degrees of competence and enthusiasm. Watching Samuel, now a young man of 10, gently rock his baby sister, Georgia was struck by how much their lives had changed, how much love they had created from almost nothing. "We did good," Quentin said one evening, echoing her thoughts as they watched their children together. "We did very good." The children grew as children do. Samuel became a young man who wanted to stay on the ranch, working alongside his father. The twins pursued different paths, Emma drawn to teaching, Clara to nursing. They supported both girls' ambitions, believing that their daughters should have the opportunities Georgia had never received. Sarah, the baby, grew into a sweet-natured child who loved animals and showed an early talent for drawing. The house was covered in her sketches of horses and cattle and the wide Nevada sky. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Their children, some now young adults, toasted their parents with laughter and love. Friends from the ranch and town joined them, filling the house and spilling out onto the property. Georgia stood on her porch as the party continued around her, taking a quiet moment to reflect. She was 43 years old now, her dark blonde hair touched with gray, her hands calloused from 2 decades of hard work. But she was deeply, completely happy. Quentin found her there, as he always did, and pulled her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" "The day we met. How terrified I was, how certain I was that my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning." She looked up at him, this man who had been her savior, her husband, her partner in everything. His hair was graying at the temples, lines etched around his eyes from years of sun and laughter, but to her he was still the young cowboy who had refused to let her give up. "I love you," she said, simple and true. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They kissed as the party continued around them, their children and friends celebrating the love that had built a family and a legacy. 20 years ago, Georgia had fainted from hunger on Main Street. Quentin had carried her home and never left. And from that one act of kindness, an entire life had bloomed. More years rolled by. Samuel married a kind girl from town and began building his own house on a portion of the ranch land. Emma became a teacher in Sloan, beloved by her students. Clara trained as a nurse and moved to Reno, where she worked in a hospital. Sarah, showing talent beyond her years, won a scholarship to study art in San Francisco. Georgia and Quentin watched their children leave and return, building their own lives while staying connected to the home and values their parents had built. They became grandparents when Samuel's wife gave birth to a boy they named Quentin, and Georgia cried happy tears holding her grandson for the first time. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of Quentin and Samuel working together. They were well respected in the community, known for fair dealing and hard work. Georgia became involved in charitable work, never forgetting what it felt like to be desperate and alone. She helped other women in difficult circumstances, offering work or assistance or just a listening ear. One evening in 1900, sitting on their porch as the sun set, Quentin took Georgia's hand. "We have been married 22 years, he said. "Best 22 years of my life. Mine too. Do you remember what you said to me once about not knowing if you could bear to lose anything else?" "I remember. I was so scared of letting myself love you. But you took the chance anyway. Best decision I ever made." He squeezed her hand gently. "I want you to know something. Whatever happens, however many years we get, it has been enough. You have made my life full and rich and meaningful." "I have no regrets, Georgia, none." She heard the weight in his words and turned to look at him more closely. "Are you all right? You are not ill, are you?" No, I am fine. I just think sometimes it is important to say these things, not to wait until it is too late." He smiled at her, that same warm smile that had captured her heart 22 years ago. "I love you. I am grateful for you every single day, and I need you to know that." "I know, and I feel the same way. We have built something beautiful together, Quentin, not just the ranch or the family, but us. What we have together, that is the real achievement." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, hands clasped, hearts full. The years continued their steady march. Quentin and Georgia grew older, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work, but their love remained constant. They watched their grandchildren grow, watched their children succeed in their chosen paths, watched their ranch continue to thrive under Samuel's increasingly capable management. In 1905, on a clear spring morning, Quentin and Georgia rode out together to the spot where he had proposed all those years ago. They made this pilgrimage occasionally, returning to the place where their future had been decided. "Still as beautiful as the first time," Georgia said, looking out over the valley. "More beautiful," Quentin replied, "because now it is ours. We made our dream real right here. We did." She leaned against him, his arm coming automatically around her. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden through Sloan a day earlier or later? If you had not been there when I fainted? I try not to think about it. The idea of a world where I never met you is too painful. Someone else might have helped me. Maybe. But they would not have been me. They would not have loved you the way I do, and you would not have had the life we built together." "Do you believe in fate?" Georgia asked. "That we were meant to find each other?" Quentin considered this. "I do not know about fate, but I believe in choice. I chose to help you. You chose to trust me. We chose to love each other and build a life together. Every day for nearly 30 years we have chosen each other. That is more powerful than fate, I think." Georgia turned to kiss him, deep and sweet, tasting 30 years of shared life in that kiss. They returned home as the sun began to set, riding side by side as they had countless times before. The house they had built together rose before them, solid and welcoming. Smoke curled from the chimney where Samuel's wife was likely preparing supper. Their grandson played in the yard, and they could hear his laughter from a distance. "Home," Quentin said simply. "Home," Georgia agreed. That evening, surrounded by family, they ate supper together. 3 generations gathered around the table Quentin had built with his own hands. Georgia looked around at the faces she loved, all of them existing because of one improbable day when a desperate woman and a kind cowboy had found each other in a small Nevada town. Later, as they prepared for bed, Quentin held Georgia close. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For saying yes, for taking a chance on me, for building this life with me, for everything. Thank you for not leaving. You carried me home and you never left, just like you promised. Easiest promise I ever kept." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had nearly every night for 3 decades, secure in their love and the life they had created. As years turned to decades, Georgia and Quentin continued their partnership. They grew old together gracefully, their love maturing into something even deeper and more profound than the passionate romance of their youth. They knew each other's every habit and thought, could communicate with a glance or a touch, finished each other's sentences without thinking. Their family expanded with more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch that had started with just the two of them and 50 acres had become a prosperous operation spanning hundreds of acres, employing several hands, supporting multiple generations. In 1910, on their 32nd wedding anniversary, the family threw a large celebration. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered, along with friends from decades of life in Sloan. The house overflowed with love and laughter and memories. Quentin, now in his 50s with silver hair and a weathered face, stood with Georgia, also silvered and lined with age, to address their family. 32 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his age, I was riding into Sloan for supplies. I had no idea that day would change my entire life. But I saw a woman fall on Main Street and something made me stop. Maybe it was thinking of my sister Sarah. Maybe it was just being raised right. Maybe it was fate or God or just plain luck. But I stopped and I helped and I fell in love. He turned to Georgia, taking her hands. You have been my partner in everything. We built this ranch together, raised our children together, faced every joy and sorrow together. You made me a better man than I ever thought I could be. And I want our children and grandchildren to know what real love looks like. It looks like choosing each other every day. It looks like working hard and holding on through the difficult times. It looks like building something meaningful together. Georgia, tears streaming down her face, spoke up. When Quentin found me, I had nothing. No money, no family, no prospects, no hope. I thought my life was over at 23 years old. But he gave me a chance, and then he gave me love, and then we built this beautiful life together. Every single thing you see here, all of you, this family, this ranch, it all started because one man refused to ride past someone who needed help. That is the legacy I want to leave. Kindness matters. Love matters. And choosing to help someone, even a stranger, can change the entire world. The room erupted in applause and tears. Their children and grandchildren embraced them, celebrating not just the anniversary but the love story that had created them all. As the party wound down and family members departed, heading to their own homes nearby or in town, Quentin and Georgia found themselves alone on their porch once again. That was quite a speech, Georgia said, leaning against her husband. It was true. Every word. Do you remember when I asked if I could stay just one night in your house, and I gave you my bed and slept in the chair? I should have known then that you were different, that you were special. I knew right away that you were special, proud and strong even when you were at your lowest. I admired that so much. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Nevada sky. Quentin. Yes, my love. Thank you for carrying me home. Thank you for letting me stay. The years continued to pass, each one adding to the rich tapestry of their shared life. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1918, surrounded by an even larger family. Their oldest grandson had married and presented them with great-great-grandchildren. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the region, but it was still fundamentally a family operation, passed down through generations. Georgia's health began to fail in her early 60s, a slow decline that they faced together with the same partnership that had characterized their entire marriage. Quentin cared for her tenderly, repaying decades of her care for him and their family. He cooked her favorite meals, sat with her for hours, held her hand through painful days. On a spring morning in 1920, with wildflowers blooming outside their bedroom window, Georgia woke to find Quentin sitting beside the bed, watching her with love in his eyes. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning, beautiful. Still a charmer after all these years. Only for you." He helped her sit up, propped against pillows, and brought her tea exactly how she liked it. "Quentin, we need to talk about what happens when I am gone. You are not going anywhere." "We both know that is not true. I am ready, love. I have had a wonderful life, more than I ever dreamed possible. I need to know you will be all right." His eyes filled with tears. "I do not know how to be all right without you. You will. You have Samuel and the girls and all the grandchildren. You have the ranch and the life we built. I will always be part of that, even when I am not here physically. I cannot imagine waking up and not seeing your face. Then think of me when you wake. Remember all our mornings together. Remember our life and smile." She reached up to touch his face, her hand trembling. "I love you, Quentin Carmichael. From the moment you picked me up off that dusty street until this very moment and beyond. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything," he corrected, tears falling freely now. "You were the making of me, Georgia." They held each other as the sun rose fully, painting their room with golden light. Around them, the house they had built together stood strong, filled with decades of memories and love. Georgia passed peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by her family, with Quentin holding her hand. She slipped away in the afternoon, the spring breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers through the open window. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the county. Georgia had touched countless lives through her kindness and generosity, and people came from miles around to pay their respects. She was laid to rest on a hill overlooking their valley, in a spot she had chosen herself. Quentin grieved deeply but carried on, as she had asked him to. He continued to work the ranch alongside Samuel, spending time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing stories about Georgia that kept her memory alive. But everyone could see that something fundamental had changed. The light in his eyes had dimmed. He still smiled and laughed, still participated in family life. But there was a sadness underneath that never quite left. On their would have been 45th wedding anniversary, Samuel found his father on the porch, staring out at the valley. "You all right, Pa?" Just remembering. "Your mother and I always spent our anniversaries right here, looking out at everything we built together. She would want you to be happy. I am happy. I have all of you, this beautiful land, a life full of blessings, but I miss her, Samuel. Every single day I miss her. I know, we all do. She saved me, you know. Everyone thinks I saved her that day in Sloan, but it was the other way around. She gave me purpose and love and a family. She made my life worth living." Samuel sat beside his father, putting an arm around his shoulders. "You saved each other. That is what love does." Quentin lived for 3 more years after Georgia's death, staying active and involved with his family until the very end. On a cool autumn morning in 1923, he did not wake up. He had passed peacefully in his sleep, lying in the bed he had shared with Georgia for over 40 years. His children found him with a slight smile on his face, his hand resting on Georgia's pillow, as though reaching for her one last time. They buried him beside Georgia on the hill overlooking their valley. The entire family gathered, along with friends and neighbors from across the region. As the sun set over the Carmichael ranch, 3 generations stood together, mourning the passing of the man who had built it all. But they also celebrated, because Quentin and Georgia's love story had created something lasting. The ranch they built continued to thrive, passing from generation to generation. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on their legacy of hard work, kindness, and love. On the shared headstone, Samuel had inscribed a simple epitaph: Quentin Carmichael, 1853 to 1923, Georgia Carmichael, 1855 to 1920. He carried her home and never left. She gave him a reason to stay. Together they built a life worth living. The story of the woman who fainted from hunger on Main Street and the cowboy who helped her became a family legend, passed down through generations. It was a reminder that one act of kindness could change everything, that love could grow from the most unlikely circumstances, that choosing to help a stranger could lead to a lifetime of happiness. Years after their deaths, their great-great-grandchildren still gathered at the ranch for holidays and celebrations. They walked the land that Quentin and Georgia had first purchased together, lived in houses built on the foundation they had laid, carried forward the values they had instilled. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, family members would sit on the porch of the original house and imagine they could feel the presence of their ancestors, that cowboy and his bride who had started it all with a chance encounter on a dusty street in Sloan, Nevada, in 1878. The Carmichael Ranch became a landmark in the region, known not just for its success, but for the love story at its foundation. People told the tale of Quentin and Georgia at weddings and family gatherings, using their love as an example of what was possible when 2 people committed fully to each other and to building something meaningful together. The house they built, expanded and modified over the years, still stood at the center of the ranch. New generations of Carmichaels lived there, raising their own children, making their own memories, but always honoring the legacy of the couple who had started it all. In the end, Georgia Winters and Quentin Carmichael's story was a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the possibility of redemption. It proved that your worst day could lead to your best life, that strangers could become soulmates, and that choosing to help someone in need could create ripples that extended far beyond anything you could imagine. Their love story, which began with one man refusing to ride past a woman in distress, became the foundation for generations of happiness. And though they were gone, their love lived on in every person who carried their blood, in every acre of land they had claimed together, in every story told about the cowboy who carried her home and never left. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the Wild West, proving that even in the hardest places and times, love could flourish and create something lasting and beautiful. Quentin and Georgia Carmichael had taken a moment of desperation and transformed it into a lifetime of love, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that we all have the power to change someone's life, that one choice to be kind rather than indifferent could alter the course of history. It reminded people to look for love in unlikely places, to take chances on others, to believe in the possibility of happy endings even when circumstances seemed dire. And every time someone told the story of how Quentin found Georgia collapsed on Main Street in Sloan, Nevada in the summer of 1878, and how he carried her home and never left, they were reminded that the greatest love stories often start with the simplest act of human kindness, and that choosing love every single day is how you build a life that matters. The sun continued to rise and set over the Carmichael ranch, over the valley that Quentin and Georgia had claimed as their own, over the graves on the hill where they rested together. The land they had loved continued to flourish, worked by hands that carried their blood and their legacy. And somewhere in the vast Nevada sky, perhaps they were together again, watching over the family they had created, satisfied with the life they had built from one desperate moment and one act of compassion that had changed everything.